Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa, in an interview with NHK, translated by Nintendo Everything, has said some things that I believe are strongly hinting at the core concept for Nintendo Switch 2. But before we go forward, let me point out that we are aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. With your help, it can happen. So here is the translation. While there is no particular technology we are focusing on at the moment, we are conducting research on a variety of new technologies. However, I believe the most important thing for our company is not seeking new technologies for novelty's sake, but rather considering how they can lead to revolutions in the act of play itself. The idea is that if we become convinced that incorporating a certain technology can provide customers with a fresh and surprising experience, then we covet its research more strongly, making investments when necessary as well. So perhaps at face value, you might read this and consider this a nothing burger, nothing of too much substance, but I beg to differ. What he is saying here is that they're not pursuing a specific gimmick to really draw in the consumer, to really surprise people and have it be the hook for what they're working on. They're not focusing on one particular direction. Their core thinking at this moment is doing whatever they can to improving the play experience. And when you consider the history of Nintendo and how things have evolved to this point, I think we can see the direction that we're headed in. Now before I tell you what I believe this direction is, I think it's important to note that I think many might think it's going in one way, but not so much. So when you look at how Nintendo has done things with their different systems, oftentimes there's some sort of new gimmick that they are really touting as some sort of big innovation to bring in players. And sometimes it's been quite the advancement. Other times it's just been sort of a tangential move, and then other times it's been mostly a gimmick that wouldn't really last too long. The Nintendo 64, it was 64-bit gaming, it was 3D graphics, multiplayer, that was a big deal, that was the future. After N64, there wasn't really any core hook beyond it just being a fun system to play, but that may also be why Nintendo started to focus on more unique hooks with their home consoles because the GameCube was a failure. So with the Nintendo Wii, they did motion controls. The code name was Nintendo Revolution. They were trying to revolutionize gaming. And the motion controls, in some ways, were a revolution because motion controls are a permanent mainstay in gaming now, but they're definitely not the primary way we play games. They're simply like a side option. So trying to go at a system as that being the primary way to play wasn't the true direction that needed to go, but it definitely was a nice little blip in history. Then with the Wii U, they tried to reinvent the home gaming experience with the Wii U gamepad, and while it may have been fun, looking between the screen on the television versus the screen on the gamepad was too distracting for many people. Playing games like Star Fox Zero just was not as fun and immersive as they wanted. And ultimately, the Wii U failed, and Nintendo moved in a bit of another direction. But I don't want to just talk about home consoles here, because with the portable systems they've tried to do innovations as well. With the Nintendo DS, they had the dual screen technology, and that worked pretty well. They followed up with a 3DS, and we enjoyed having that second screen, and it worked better than the Wii U because the screens are right next to each other. We didn't have to move our head around too much. But with the 3DS specifically, they also tried to do 3D. And while 3D was a nice, cool, novel concept, in practice, it didn't make that much of a difference, and for a lot of people, the imagery was a little messed up. Myself personally, I always saw a little bit of that ghosting, even with the new Nintendo 3DS that had improved face tracking to make it better. It was just something that wasn't consistent enough, it was too distracting, and ultimately wasn't something worth keeping for the long term. So I bring up this history of Nintendo attempting to innovate with some of their different systems, because a lot of this culminated into the Switch. The Switch incorporated motion controls. The Switch incorporated the Wii U gamepad in the sense of being able to take the Switch out of the home console, so if you are playing in the living room with your family and you can no longer play on the TV, you can take the Switch wherever you'd like. It still is a portable system that has a nice sleep mode like the DS and the 3DS did, except instead of closing it with a clamshell-like design, it's simply a quick little tap of a power button. So Nintendo brought in these different innovations, and of course everything else in prior systems and generations for the last couple of decades, and they made the Switch. And the Switch is arguably Nintendo's best system ever made, because it incorporates everything. It's so comfortable to play and use for so many different people with different lifestyles, And the Switch isn't a lightning in the bottle situation like the Wii was. The Wii caught fire, got a lot of attention by people who don't typically play games. But a lot of those people moved on to just do different things with their lives or play on smartphones, and that was it. The Switch has claimed an even greater level of success, and it's with actual gamers, people who like playing and buying games. The attach rates on Switch, the amount of people who are buying games per system, is very high, and it's still going. So Nintendo struck gold with the Switch. The Switch is arguably their greatest success. But with all the prior generations, there was always something that they were trying to accomplish that they couldn't quite catch. Even with the Wii, it was not permanent success. But with the Switch, and its more mature and progressive marketing, because back in the day Nintendo mostly focused on just kid-friendly advertisements, and while they may still have some of that, a lot of their advertisements now are for people in their 20s and 30s, which are a bulk of the people who play Switch. So I bring this all up because I think it's an important context when we take into consideration what Furukawa is saying here. There's nothing dramatic that they need to change with the Switch. The Switch is the ideal scenario. What they need to do is continue to look in different directions to find ways to improve the experience, but it doesn't have to be something that's crazy, insane, and wacky so they can bring in another audience. That's a big part of why Nintendo tried to innovate in the ways they did, because they're always trying to find something that would really hook and bring people in. But the Switch hasn't lost momentum really, somewhat, yes, because it's an old system, but the fact that it's maintaining this level of success this late into the system's life cycle, I think that indicates that the formula Switch is good, and all they need to do is modernize it, evolve it, improve it for sure, but move forward. So by saying that they're not focusing on any specific technology, not researching on any particular thing, but they're more interested on just play itself and what they can do to evolve that overall, I think that suggests that they're not looking for some sort of crazy hook with Switch 2, and that what they're looking to do is transition over momentum seamlessly. When we consider that they've already told us that they plan on bringing over Nintendo player accounts, so that has strong implications for NSO and eShop things translating over, potentially also backwards compatibility. When we account for the Eurogamer and Video Games Chronicle reports that the system is going to be basically like a Switch with cartridges, they are going to continue in a very similar direction, and backwards compatibility, in my opinion, seems very likely. Especially when you account for the Pokemon situation, because Pokemon games have always been on the handheld systems, and backwards compatibility has always been very important, especially when they're transitioning over to their next generations. So I believe we're looking at a more powerful, better optimized version of the Switch that will be backwards compatible, that you will be able to transfer over your Nintendo account, and maybe even a lot of your purchases. We shall see. And that would even say this strengthens the argument for what the Switch is going to be called. And some of you might find this to be crazy, but maybe they're just going to call it Switch 2. Now, when I bring this up in the titles for my videos and things, it's just shorthand so you know what I'm talking about, what we're referring to here. And it may have a different name once Nintendo announces it. Maybe there is something else that they're doing that makes it worthwhile to change the name. But when you consider the Wii U scenario, how a lot of people thought that that was just another Wii with a tablet or something, there was a lot of confusion there. If you want to have the most clean and obvious marketing, if you want to have the smoothest transition ever, if you're not going to have some sort of dramatic departure, as I believe this interview is further suggesting, then I think Switch 2 does make a lot of sense. And if it's not 2, it's something that very clearly illustrates that this is the sequel to the Switch, the follow-up to the Switch. If you call it Switch Original, or Switch 1, or Switch 0, Switch Up, Switch Down, Switch Left, I'm not sure any of those will necessarily indicate a sequel. It'll also point something else out. Well, maybe they could come out with something like maybe like Super Switch, and maybe people will understand that this is a better super version of the Switch. What will they do after that? What if the Switch 2 or Super Switch is so successful that they want to maintain this direction again? Are they going to call it the Super Duper Switch, the Switch Ultra? That's why I'm not all aboard the Super Switch name train, just because I feel like that they're putting themselves into a corner in terms of what they name it after that. And really, as basic and boring as some may think of it, Switch 2 is clear-cut, people understand it just the same way we always understand what a PlayStation is with its respective number. This will maximize sales potential in my opinion. And I do believe that as of the Switch era, Nintendo has made a transition. They combined their handheld and home console divisions. The Nintendo of the past is history. They will still make amazing games, they will still find ways to innovate, but those inconsistent, wacky innovations that were mostly more like novelties, the poor marketing directions, I think that's Nintendo of old. And the executives in place now, like Shuntaro Furukawa, are very business-oriented, and they're going to make the right moves to lead Nintendo in the best direction from a fiscal perspective. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.